We are recording. I see it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Becky. Um, I'd like to just start by saying welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Camille Cyprian. Welcome to True Tuesdays, our first session, Building Our Understanding of Equity. So happy that you all have joined us for this session and looking forward to our conversation today. Just a quick note, TRUE is an acronym for Transforming Rural Understanding of Equity. And the TRUE Partnership is an informal alliance of equity practitioners practicing in rural from various organizations and communities. True Tuesdays is our offering an invitation to broaden our partnership community. And it's through this inspiring learning, co-learning model, really, that we aim to connect experienced and emerging community leaders across rural Minnesota to identify, nurture, model, and advance actions that one, use intersectional lenses to dismantle white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism, and other oppressive aspects of our contemporary American culture and policies. Two, to increase social, racial, and economic justice in partnership with communities impacted by disparities. And three, to support a rural Minnesota that is safe, inclusive, and prosperous for all. So Becky was reading out all of the places that we are sitting and representing. And so I welcome you all warmly. That's a little bit about who we are as your hosts of this community learning space, and we certainly welcome you warmly. If you want to move to the next slide, Becky, we can shift. I want to just take a note here, a content cautionary, if you will, that subject matters around equity really do have the potential to cause strong emotions. That is okay. You're not alone. We're here with you, and we're here to support you through that. And so I just wanted to make a note of that. And also that we are recording these main big sessions, but that the breakout rooms that you'll break into in a few moments will not be recorded. So just want to do a little housekeeping in that regard. I like to start equity conversations with a grounding. And I typically do that through breath. I think the necessary act of breathing has really become political in our current social context. And I believe it to be a meaningful resistance to push against that narrative and to do that collectively by grounding in our breath. And so I am going to invite you to join me in a little bit of what we call soft belly breathing. So if you would take a deep breath, allow your eyes to close or find a place to soften your gaze in front of you. And I'll invite you to take the biggest breath that you've taken all day. Breathe in deeply, in through your nose, out through your mouth, with your belly soft and relaxed. And just continue to breathe like that at your own pace, slowly and deeply, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Just a few moments. When we breathe in this way, it really offers the best oxygen exchange in our lungs. It reduces our anxiety and our stress, counteracts any fight or flight that we might be experiencing, and really allows our nerves to connect and build relationship with other people and be in community together. And so as you breathe again deeply in through your nose, out through your mouth, I invite you to set an intention for our time together today. What do you want to bring to this space? What do you want to offer to this space? What do you hope to glean from this space and take with you? And take your final breath, final deep breath. And when you're ready, you can return your attention back to our group. Thank you for doing that. It allows us to really get present and be here with intention and with open minds and spirits. So thank you for that. If we go to the next slide, you'll see just a reiteration of our purpose. I mentioned a bit of this earlier. One thing to note is that we do recognize that there are a range of experiences among all of us. And we also know that this is a journey and not a destination. And that's, we're all learning. We all have areas of growth, what we call growth zones. And so we really welcome and support practitioners of all levels of engagement in this space. As we move forward, in the spirit of community and that spirit of community and support, we're going to take a poll. And so we're going to ask you really who or what community or communities you're bringing with you into the space today. So we asked you where you were sitting. And I believe there will be a poll about what community sector you in your practice directly impact. So just take a few moments to respond. What community sectors your work directly impacts? How are we looking on those results?
They're piling up.
They're piling up. Good deal.
Okay, it looks like we have 85%, 87 of the people have voted.
Let's see what we got.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and polling and share the results.
Awesome. So we have a great mix here, it seems like. And I saw in the chats, there are folks who are bringing arts and culture into the space as well. So welcome. Thank you. We do have a broad community, and we're so excited that there's representation across all of those areas. As we maybe advance the slide, and I'm going to touch quickly on some of the aims that we have for our engagement today, as well as throughout the series. And so I'm not sure if the slides are advancing for you all, but I'll just say that today's session is focused on how we can create and develop better understanding of equity. And so I'm reminded of the video, the Equity 101 video that was sent ahead of time or shared ahead of time. There were a couple of things that really stuck with me out of that video that we're really going to touch and dig into today. And that's knowing your why and having some common language around the what. And that is how we'll spend our time in breakouts today. Equity is not solely ideated, though. It's also embodied. And so what we hope you feel today are a safe and welcoming environment, that you're able to take learnings out of the conversation and the shared knowledge of the group and actually apply that into your practice moving forward. Again, that we know that there's a wide and deep well of wisdom out of this community that we're co-creating today. And so we're hoping that we're able to leverage all of the knowledge that we hold collectively, and then recognize and name that we're going to make mistakes throughout this process. And how do we model the grace and intention and accountability of learning from those mistakes and being better in our practice. And so that is a bit about what we're hoping we're discussing and also what you feel today.
You know, little tiny.
And lastly, before I turn it over to Kevin, who is our facilitator for our time today, I'd like to talk about the 4 agreements. So as we're co-creating this space, as we're thinking about how we hold one another accountable and actually create relationships and community, would like to offer up these 4 agreements for how we will be with one another on our True Tuesdays today and moving forward. So first, just staying engaged, remaining engaged. Dr. Glenn Singleton says that in our society, we have given permission, and I would add, we have permission to disengage from this conversation around race. And so making a commitment to really stay engaged, especially when things get uncomfortable, ensures that the important conversations actually do happen. Connected with that is we should expect that there will be some discomfort. That, you know, it is inevitable, especially in conversations around race and some of the things that we mentioned earlier. But it's through dialogue, and even when it's uncomfortable dialogue, that learning happens, that reconciliation, healing, and change can begin. We're asking and inviting you to speak your truth and come into this conversation with a willingness to share what is real for you, even if it might not be real for others in the group, and for folks to respect that and come to a space of, or come to this conversation and engagements from a space of being open and speaking and respecting other people's truths as well. Speaking your truth and respecting other people's truths. And then finally, to balance that out, we should expect and accept some non-closure. That means that we're going to have to sit in a little bit of ambiguity. We're going to have to hang out in uncertainty. And that's okay. That's okay. We're not going to rush to quick solutions. We're going to be intentional and thoughtful, and recognize that we may not solve anything today. We certainly won't solve everything today. But today, our work is to think about, reflect upon our practice, and identify the next steps or 2 that we can make to make meaningful change in whatever way we're able to do that. And I am going to turn it over to Kevin with that. I will just say one other norm that I would like to share on behalf of the hosts, me as your host, is that our goal is for us to really be able to create space for connections and relationships and collaboration to happen. So when we break out into our small groups, we're going to try to keep them as small as possible, ideally around 6 folks. I think depending on registration, we may have to adjust that a little bit, but it is really our goal to really have small, intimate groups so that folks can also build relationships across this learning community. And so with that, and without further ado, I welcome you one more time and welcome Kevin Lindsey as our lead facilitator for today's session. Kevin?
Thank you so much, Camille. Appreciate that you're all very interested to get into that conversation after watching the equity video, so I won't keep you long. I will say to Becky, I'd like to be able to bring folks out of the breakout rooms at 3:25 from our schedule, so we'll give the breakout room facilitators an additional 5 minutes. Let me leave you quickly with 2 definitions which appear in Webster's dictionary about equity. And I think this will be part of what Camille is alluding to about this being an ongoing search, an ongoing thought process as to how we define equity. The first definition in Webster's is equity is about ownership. Who owns something? Who has equity within? And again, the history of our country, who was a citizen, who was not a citizen, we are now evolving, and we have expanded that circle of folks who can claim citizenship within our country. What does that then mean for the folks that were initially within that about sharing? The second definition which is given is justice. Justice according to natural law. So again, if we think about this idea of What does justice mean? This is an elusive term, this idea that it's embedded within the Declaration of Independence, the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There has been an ongoing discussion about, well, what does that actually mean, and what are the duties owed to one another within our country? So equity, it's has always been a question within our country. Equity, it has been, I think, when we get together as groups, as communal members, what does it mean to be in partnership and relationship with others? I think this is more of the most critical conversation we as equity professionals, equity advocates, will have to grapple with and help people facilitate expanding that circle to be more inclusive for folks going forward. Thank you all for kicking this off. This is really important work. Thank you, Camille, for agreeing to lead us in this discussion within the True Partnership. You are now going to be broken out into small breakout rooms. Again, we'll come back at 3:25, and we'll then discuss some of the things which came out within those breakout rooms discussions. So, Becky?
Thank you, Kevin. Facilitators, I have made some changes based on who is on the call today. So when you get into your breakout rooms, you may see a couple of different people who you weren't expecting. And I will bring you back together at 3:25. Give you a kind of a 2-minute warning before we come back in, and wish you all a good conversation. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, pause recording for now. Kevin, it looks like we're all back.
And super quiet too.
Everyone's on mute.
Yeah, we want it or not, we're all back.
Hey, Pablo.
That was a great discussion.
Becky, as usual, is doing a great job directing.
Crowd.
Great.
So what I would like to do is I will kick off for the facilitators some of the thoughts that I heard. And again, echoing what Camille had framed for us, this is really a learning environment for sharing of best practices and building a spirit of community among individuals who are passionate about equity and building equity throughout all of Minnesota. So I appreciated the conversation with the individuals within my room. What was interesting is that the participants were at different phases within equity. Some had been on the journey for about 5 years for their organization, where others were just beginning. Some had retained an outside consultant to help them work through it. And again, others were further along. All talked about this idea of process being important, whether that was for the folks within the organization or working within community. All felt that it was critically important to understand the why the organization was doing what they were doing within equity. We were moved by the song Amazing Grace within the video. We understood that this was a unique moment in time to go beyond just simply cultural competence. And that we also understood that equity was fluid and that there needed to be a sense of dynamic movement and conversation within the organization. So some of the things that came out of the conversation for my group. I think at this point in time, I am going to ask Pablo to report out.
Great, thank you. Some of you have texted me saying that I look like I'm in a spaceship. Not quite, but it's good to see you all. Our group also had a great conversation, several observations and big ideas. I'm gonna try to summarize it really quick. Living by example and intentionality to answer the first question as big ideas. Second question, recruitment and requirements are being changed and put effort into. recruitment on staff and board members is important, especially being intentional about giving opportunity to BIPOC communities, and then addressing historical inequity. I think it's important to answer the last part of the second question, and we had a great discussion about that one. On number 3, be vulnerable. We have to do it. Change happens in the speed of trust. That's pretty inspirational. Eric, thank you for sharing that. And also food is one of the strategies to put this into action. So, and I voted yes on that one for sure.
There's no doubt in my mind we're going to vote yes for that. Eden.
Hello, everybody. I had a great room. There were 4 participants who really represent a wide range of experiences in terms of where they're at within their organizations and this work of journey. And I would say that folks are at different places in understanding the why in terms of the importance of working on equity. And 2 takeaways from our group. One is that this work really takes time and commitment, and it's not, there is no quick, have the meeting or 2 and you've got a plan. It really takes time, relationship building first before being able to make a difference. And then another key takeaway, and I just heard that in Pablo's also, is starting with the lens of historical and local perspectives. Personal perspectives, looking at inequities over time and how, for example, how wealth was built in particular places. And what does that mean for things like philanthropy or land grant universities? And when we have a better understanding of that, that can help us understand how best to act. Those are our key takeaways. Great conversation.
Thank you so much, Eden. Really appreciate it. Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Our group had a really insightful discussion from a variety of opinions and also expressed different levels of experience within their organization. That ranged from putting together a statement to really try and understand as a beginning step what diversity and equity and inclusion are, as well as to more action-oriented strategies that are very connected to community. We really, some 2 takeaways that we kind of tossed around in our group was, 1, the importance of understanding that, and I'm quoting one of our group members, equity is ever evolving. No one has the sole truth or the solutions to attack the problems of injustice. And integral to that idea organizationally was also the idea of individual commitment to understanding our own biases. Saw that as really an important both strategy as well as just part of the capacity building internally to have that individual attention that was spoken about at the beginning. We talked about, I want to mention something that talked about connecting data to addressing the systemic problems and demographics, and really starting locally in that perspective to be very intentional about working within your community to invite voices, whether that is around economics, whether it is through the arts. Our group really talked about the intersectionality of different sectors of community, and those were really our 2 takeaways. Everyone was, very forthcoming and thoughtful in their reflections, and just really appreciated speaking with each other.
Thank you, Carrie. Really appreciate the report out. Let's go to Lisa.
Sure. I am really valuing hearing from the other small groups so far because you guys talked about stuff that we didn't talk about and we had the same questions. So super cool. Really, really cool. I'll have a couple things. My group was as awesome as any other group. A couple of quick things. One is that that first question about the agreement to why, and an emerging thought about kind of the shared sense of why, but not necessarily the what or the how. And that within our small groups, some came from larger organizations and some small work groups within large organizations. So that sense of sort of distance from the whole, or being able to really come to agreement in a smaller group than in a larger or a large organization. And then around the what equity means, we were getting some real momentum around this idea about getting hung up on definitions and wordsmithing, and the idea that perhaps maybe if we have enough overlap that we can do that working definition, or that we know equity when we see it and we can just do the good work. So not to say we shouldn't have those conversations, but to not get hung up on the definitions, because while there are statements, it's not just a statement. It's about action and it's about movement. So good conversation, good start. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Monica.
Well, let me start by want Nancy to share if I miss something. It was great conversation with the group. It was interesting to see that despite the people involved in diversity and inclusion in their organizations, there was consensus that about not being clear about the why or the what, and not even about the strategies to build collective meaning. So there's a lack of conversation and getting to those points, and in part because of it's uncomfortable to deal with those questions. And with that, we had time to connect with our own stories and why we are here and why we are joining this conversation today, and if this is worth it and has value. And yeah, I think we agree on that. This is a right start. But with that, Nancy, you want to say something else? No? Anybody else in my group want to say something? Okay, so I think we can leave it there.
All right, great report, great report. Casey.
Our group was spanned the depth and breadth, I think, of the organizations represented. We had school systems, we had a regional development, and a community member. And some of the things that we talked about centered around an incredible conversation, a really honest conversation about racial equity and the relevance of racial equity in rural communities. And sometimes our group is reflecting, sometimes at first it might seem easy to have buy-in or the why consensus around equity, and then it can get challenging. The work can get, once you start to move through it, really challenge some assumptions and start to get uncomfortable. And when you really start to dig in and talk about and surface those inequities in policies, in practices, in governmental systems, when people really start to grapple with those structural inequities, it can get really uncomfortable. And so our group reflected a little bit about that. One other key takeaway, our group talked about what it means to build relationships, especially around families, and helping new community members navigate systems, structural systems, DMV and the healthcare system, and what it really means to get to know our neighbors and be in relationship and learning about individuals and families and their stories, and how the system might need to adapt to further and foster those relationships.
All right. Thank you very much. Melissa.
Well, I'm going to step out and say I had the best group. I know it's not supposed to be a competition. I know, I get that. No, it was really a good conversation. And in the end, it was kind of like, what are those 3 things that as you're working in this work, would you really talk about as being key? And the first one has already been mentioned, and that's really around intentionality. You know, intentionally about gaining shared meaning around what is this container of equity? Why are we doing it? What, you know, even if you don't have an exact definition, but to begin to have those conversations, those honest and authentic conversations around what does this mean to you? Because as you work in different communities, the differences certainly show up. And then the second one is really kind of that what or how, and that's also being intentional around developing, whether it's steering committees or task force or commissions, but making sure that they are representative of the groups that you're trying to work in, and making sure that the voices are heard and there's authentic ways for them to engage and feel engaged. And looking for new ways to do that, especially in this online environment that was talked about. And then the third one is really just being okay if you don't have all the answers. And sometimes you're not going to get it right. And just being okay in that space of you know what, we're all people and we're trying to meet people where they're at, and we're doing that in authentic and honest ways, and we're going to have to keep evolving. So that's the takeaways that my group had. So thank you.
Really appreciate that report out. Dawn.
Hi, everyone. I too had a great group, just to clarify that. We were a small group though. We had Beth on there who had called in as well. So she had video in one breakout room and audio in another breakout room. So we had 3 of us, which was great. What we recognized was that within our organizations, many are committed and very much agree on the importance of equity, but that agreeing on that why is a more difficult process to try to get to sometimes. And so that it's really helpful within organizations to be able to set that stage and to be able to meet people where they're at. And in some cases, it might mean that you all get on the same page, but then somebody leaves the organization, you hire someone new on, and you have to kind of go back and bring people up to speed again, so that you can all walk that path together. There's a lot of trust that needs to be established around having these conversations about what and why equity. And then we talked a lot about the IDI as a tool. It's being used within several of the organizations that were part of my group, and some are just getting started with it. Some have been utilizing for a while, where they're to the point of offering mentorship opportunities now for employees to kind of figure out if, you know, wherever they are within that intercultural development assessment and how they can move the dial on that. And then I think, oh, and then I also like just the standardizing the definitions around equity, that it should be, you know, if you're walking into this department within your organization, they're going to have the same understanding of equity as it is in this department. So you're all, as an organization, lifting up the same goals around equity. I think that's about it for me.
All right, thank you, Dawn. Julie. And before you go on, Julie, remind folks that if you'd like to, please feel free to put ideas, thoughts, suggestions, links in the chat box.
Yes, please do that, so we can gather all those thoughts and get it back to the whole group. So our room too was amazing. We had a lot of the creatives in our group, and our discussion really, when we talk about the definition of equity, they really felt like it was more of a broader term, and maybe it needs to go much deeper. And we're all in consensus about that. We were all also thinking that it's important to look around the table and see who's not present, what community members are not there, and not to create tokenism, but truly to build authentic relationships with each of the communities that live within your town, so that they know that their voices, we just don't want to see them 1 hour a month, but we want to build relationship with them as well. We all need to come to the table. And a lot of times, if we too had smaller and larger organizations, but sometimes the larger organizations, they create their equity statement, and but we felt as though it would be important to take that statement back to your own community, wherever you're working, and to see if that still fits. Does it fit in the metro, but does it also fit in rural Minnesota? Does it fit in that rural country? Where people are living with cornfields and farmers and the whole thing. And also another thing that I thought was really resourceful is looking through the Midwest to see other ways that communities are building their equity and creating their definitions, not just looking at the state of Minnesota, but jumping over and looking at North or South Dakota. And I thought that was really resourceful as well. It was a very refreshing conversation, and I look forward to more in the future.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Cheryl, and then Rose to close us out. Cheryl?
Thanks, Kevin. And Melissa, oh no, you didn't have the best group. We had amazing people from diverse perspectives, public, private, and nonprofits that are at different stages of their journey. A couple takeaways were that, I think everyone has said that their organizations were in agreement, and the why was because who matters. And I thought that was insightful. I also found it enlightening that customers and members are expecting us to meet their needs, and it's corporate responsibility in addition to social cohesion. And so I thought that was an interesting part of our conversation and perspectives. When we were talking about a takeaway around what does equity mean, the group was insightful to talk a little bit about how that means voice and access from their perspectives, and that it's important to not assume who has access, and that equity equals power. And that's also what it means, power, right? So that was named, and I appreciated that. There was talk a little bit in discussion around how equity means that there's a commitment to the journey. Many of you said that, and a commitment to systems change. And that last point that I think was interesting, we talked about strategies. There were a lot of strategies that were talked about in terms of engaging untraditional partners, self-education, which we know is important, organizational evaluation, some things around learning from others, and leadership, making commitment to the journey as a strategy. But I think what the conversation ended on, and the other last takeaway, is that we're still defining, these are Cheryl's words, but equity euphoria around strategies. Like, what are those strategies? And there's a hunger for us to know more about what kinds of strategies actually work in different spaces, as have been alluded to here. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
All right, with equity euphoria, I like it. We've coined a new term. Rose.
It's good to be in this space. I feel like I took a field trip somewhere, and to see Bernadine, my goodness, it's been years. You way up there in Grand Rapids, it's really great. If I had to say, use words of summary, it would be no, no, and wanna. Because everyone said no. We really are here. We don't have any formal agreement. We don't know. And my purpose for being here, and this came from everyone in the group, is really just to learn more about what it is we're trying to do. One used the example of the baseball park as being a good visual, and that they're starting to share that with their staff, because it does have a lot of good, visuals for people to see and to begin making analogies. Someone else referenced also, as somebody else did in their report, that the IDI exercise is being implemented with everyone coming in, and it just shows what their concerns are and how bad they are in one sense. But there really is no diversity outside of age diversity. So what are we talking about when we talk about equity? So in their case, equity is all about white people and age differences. So it's quite a challenge in that sense, in terms of really trying to put something in place in the language and using the language that makes sense. So in essence, one thing is we need to have more things, more videos that can help people start where they are. So top 3 things: we need more training, number 1. Number 2, we need to be able to reach people where they are, because people don't need to feel like they don't know where or what this is. We're just getting used to the language of diversity and inclusion. And now here comes the word equity, and we're trying to figure out how to make sense of all this. And deep listening was the third thing, to really start trying to do more of that. And some are doing it one-on-one, but realizing deep listening is really important, more across their organizations and certainly in their communities. So those were the top 3 things: need training, need to meet people where they are, and incorporate deep listening.
Thank you, Rose. Really appreciate all of the respective report outs. There are a couple of documents which are identified within the chat. Appreciate Jane Leonard, the Executive Director of Growth and Justice, pointing the way to the Thriving by Design blueprint there. If you've not had a chance to take a look at that, I would encourage everybody to take a look at it. One thing I wanted to share with the group, I think when I was the commissioner of the Department of Human Rights within the state, we sat down with the respective commissioners and Governor Davis' cabinet, and we talked about his vision of creating opportunity for all within Minnesota. And again, everybody had signed on as commissioners. It was interesting to see how people still viewed equity different, even within that small subset, and the need to try and really work very hard with intentionality to ensure that we could all get on board with a plan to sort of move that vision of equity forward. So I share your pain as it relates to organizations or communities trying to get everybody on board with equity, but I would say that we found it incredibly valuable, incredibly powerful going through that experience of talking about what it really means and coming up with some ideas on how we could move forward. I don't think we accomplished everything that we wanted to, but I think we moved the ball a lot further along because we were willing to spend that time and try to develop that common sense and understanding of what equity would mean. So as I turn the baton back over to Camille, I encourage you to continue to be a part of the True Partnership. I think this was a great first start for bringing in conversations. I know, and having sat down with the folks that are put together these bi-weekly meetings, that there's a lot of passion among the folks that have been in the space with the Blandin Foundation. Really appreciate the passion within the Blandin Foundation to make the space available for us. So I'm encouraging you to stay the path, stay involved within the True Partnership. And with that, I will turn it over to Camille.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for leading and facilitating us through those small group conversations. It sounds like there was great, really juicy content that came out of that, and some folks looking forward to continuing these conversations. So I agree in that it's a great start. I think for the next few minutes here, just wanted to offer space if there are activities taking place in your area that you would like to share with this group I may invite you to unmute yourself and share that. So we can do that verbally. And then if there are additional resources that you would like to share with the group, links, etc., please do put those in the chat. We're going to save that and compile them so that we have a list of resources and that we can continue to grow that collectively and have a resource to share with this group. So with that, I'll just pause and see, is there any village news, any activities? Lisa.
I just found out if anybody's reading the Good Time for the Truth, there's a couple of the authors of chapters are going to be tonight, virtually, online. Oh goodness, the link didn't come through. I'll find the link and put it on there. But if you're curious, I listened to some of the authors a week or so ago, and it was amazing. And of course, it's an outstanding book. So I'll stop with that.
Thanks, Lisa. Other activities or events? All right, with that, I'll also encourage, I believe Kevin put in the chat, one thing that you're leaving with today. Hopefully there was a lot of good information that came out of your conversations, but we're hoping you can identify at least one thing that you're going to take with you or commit to do within your organization or your practice around equity. So if you would do that as a kind of closing checkout, while I share with you what's happening for our next session. So session number 2 and session number 2, Right on Race, part 1. It is a 2-part series, so we'll be back September 22nd from 2:30 to 4 o'clock. We will be with Stacey Wells and Bukata Hayes. They have an amazing journaling opportunity for us to really get into our own understanding through prompts of how what we're thinking around diversity, equity, inclusion topics related to race, what we're feeling, and what we might be doing. So it's a great, a really great self-reflection and then dialoguing series that we hope that you will join us for. I will say, please register. Maybe we can throw that registration link in the chat if it's available. Otherwise, we will absolutely follow up with you all to make sure that you're able to connect with that. And I will just read quickly the description. So rural communities must meaningfully engage on issues and implications of race, racism, and anti-Blackness. The bedrock of whiteness is anti-Blackness. By extension, this includes Latinos, Asians, and Indigenous people. Sentiments, notions, and beliefs. It's important to address this specifically in an effort to build greater equity in rural Minnesota. The Right on Race effort effectively moves people from passively non-racist to actively anti-racist while paying dividends in our current time in regards to courageous engagement for change. And it looks like there will be a registration link in the follow-up email tomorrow. So thank you for joining. Appreciate so much you being here. We hope to see you next time.